The concept of highest and best use for the national portion of the real estate exam is a cornerstone of the appraisal process and property valuation. Because when an appraiser is tasked with finding the market value of a property, they are not just looking at what sits on the land today, but rather the most profitable and efficient use that the land can be put to. The exam will frequently ask you to identify the 4 specific tests that define highest and best use, and you must know them in order to answer those scenario-based questions correctly. These tests are whether a use is legally permissible, physically possible, financially feasible, and maximally productive. Legally permissible means checking if the use is allowed under current zoning ordinances, building codes, and any private restrictions like easements or deed restrictions. If a property owner wants to build a commercial gas station in a neighborhood zoned strictly for single-family residential use, that plan fails the first test because it is not legally allowed without a variance or a zoning change. Physically possible refers to the actual physical constraints of the site, such as the size of the lot, the shape of the land, the soil quality, and the presence of any environmental hazards or topography issues. You might encounter a scenario where a lot is too small to accommodate the footprint of a large industrial warehouse, which would make that use physically impossible regardless of what the zoning says. The third test is financial feasibility, where the appraiser determines if the proposed use will actually generate enough income or value to cover the costs of construction and operation, while still providing a reasonable profit to the owner. If building a luxury hotel in a remote area would result in a net loss because there is no market demand for high-end rooms, then the use is not financially feasible and should be discarded from the analysis. Finally, the appraiser identifies the use that is maximally productive, which is the one specific option out of all the feasible ones that results in the highest overall value for the property. This is often calculated by looking at the residual land value, which is the amount of value left over for the land after the costs of labor, capital, and coordination have been satisfied. A major point of confusion on the exam is whether an appraiser evaluates the property as it stands today or as if it were empty. The truth is that an appraiser must perform this analysis twice in every narrative appraisal. They analyze the land as if it were vacant to determine what should be built there, and then they analyze the property with its current improvements to see if those improvements continue to add value or if they have reached the end of their economic life. If the land is worth more empty than it is with an old building on it, the highest and best use might involve the demolition of the existing structure. This brings up the term interim use, which is a concept you are likely to see on a test question. Interim use occurs when a property is currently being used for one purpose, but is clearly transitioning to a different and more valuable use in the future, such as a small residential home sitting on a corner lot that has been rezoned for a high-rise development. To keep these 4 tests straight for your exam day, remember the mnemonic phrase, "Let people find money," which stands for legally permissible, physically possible, financially feasible, and maximally productive. Always remember that the highest and best use must be determined before an appraiser can choose their comparable sales, because if the comparables do not share the same highest and best use as the subject property, the entire appraisal will be invalid. If the exam asks you which principle of value is the most fundamental to the valuation of real estate, you should look for highest and best use because it dictates the entire direction of the appraiser's research and analysis. This concept ensures that land is utilized in the way that creates the most wealth for the owner and the highest value for the market overall.